Oh, that's a lot of Xenon requests. Alrighty, let's go. Xenon's a hybrid class, being both a pirate and thief, with one of the most unique stat systems in the game. They're the only class that has to build for percent all stats. Even so, their kit is a good chunk of utility for both party and solo play, plenty of options for mobility, and their entire burst is an iframe throughout almost the entire duration. With nearly 80 skills to choose from, I can see why people want a guide on this daunting looking class, being overloaded with choices. Let's start with all those skills. Right off on the beginner tab, Supply Surplus is your class resource that generates 1 charge every 4 seconds, or while attacking or evading damage, up to 5 charges at first job. Every job rank you gain 5 extra max capacity for this skill, up to a total of 20 at 4th job. Each charge you have also gives 1% all stats each. You also get a few passives that let you equip pirate and thief equipment freely, this one that boosts stats depending on what main stats reach a certain threshold, and this one that converts your Star Force to instead increase the stats you use, strength, dex, and luck, up to a cap of 100 total Star Force. Liberty Boosters is a skill that lets you stay in the air for 30 seconds, and slowly fly in any direction, gradually gaining speed the longer you hold that one direction. Click it again to cancel it at any time. 30-second duration, 30-second cooldown. Modal Shift is a skill that you can't use at all until 2nd job. In fact, it doesn't actually appear in your beginner skills until you reach 2nd job, so I'll go more into detail about it there. For now, let's jump right on over to 1st job. You get a flash jump that can be used twice in the air every time you jump, 2 passives including an upgrade to one of your beginner skill passives, a basic mobbing skill, and this toggle that sends out missiles from you every time you attack, 2-second cooldown in between missile creation. Lastly, Circuit Surge is an attack buff that costs 3 surplus energy charges. 2nd job gives you a little more to play around with. A whole bunch of passives you'd expect from every class, including some Xenon specific ones, and 2 skills. Ion Thrust simply costs 3 surplus energy, and shoves enemies back in whichever direction you drive it in. You can also jump around while using it. Lastly, Quicksilver is actually 3 skills in 1. Remember Modal Shift from the beginner tab? Now you can use it to switch Quicksilver's modes. Flash is another basic mobbing skill. Concentrate has a longer horizontal range and gives 30% extra crit rate on just this attack. And Takeoff is an up jump that mobs around its starting location. 3rd job gives more passives, including this one that does passive damage when an enemy gets 3 airframes on them, which are given by chance through each of your attacks, and reducing their accuracy per airframe they have. You also get another toggle for missiles, except this one is purely when you get hit or evade attacks, as well as a couple buffs. This first one simply instantly gives you surplus energy, 30-second cooldown. However, this one, Manifest Projector, is a Shadow Partner-like skill that doesn't have a duration. It doubles your attacks for everything except your missiles and other summons, does 70% of your final damage, and lasts until you take total damage equal to 1000% or 10 times your max health. Once it expires, you can just recast it again. Diagonal Chase is a nice vertical mobility skill that sends you up at a 45-degree angle in whichever direction you're facing, and can also be used in the air. And Gravity Pillar sends enemies in front of you up into the air. Lastly, Combat Switch's 3 skills are Explosion, which attacks in front of you, Air Whip, which does more damage to airborne enemies, like those sent up by Gravity Pillar, and Fission, which is another up jump that can only be used in the air. 4th job has a bunch more passives, but my favorite of these is Multilateral, getting not only 1 upgrade, but 2. Completely unnecessary, but they did it just because they didn't want to combine them. I don't know why. The ever so prevalent Maple Warrior and Heroes will. This buff that lasts for a minute and eats up your entire surplus energy gauge, but in return gives you big stats. And this weird, mostly useless skill. Temporal Pod is kind of like Buccaneer's Time Leap, gradually reducing your whole party's cooldowns if they're nearby you. It can only be used when you're not in combat, and you have to keep sitting in it to get the full effect of it reducing your party's cooldowns. 2-minute cooldown, and it cancels upon being hit by enemies. Beam Dance is a mobbing skill you hold down to use that attacks everything you come in contact with. The main appeal of this skill is you can move around and jump while using it, though you do also move slightly slower during it. No duration, no cooldown. You can just keep holding it for as long as your little heart desires. Lastly, your 2 mode skills, starting with Mecha Purge. Snipe is your main bossing skill that hits one enemy 7 times and ignores enemy defense. Bombard is a slowish mobbing skill that shoots a laser in front of you. And Bombardment is your main mobbing skill that attacks fast and in a fairly decent area around you. Finally, last but not least, Hypogram Field is a summon that places down a big colored rectangle with an orb that bounces around inside of it, in front of where you cast it. Penetrate does damage to enemies whenever they're hit by the bouncing ball. Force Field does damage to enemies whenever the ball hits the edge of the field. And Support increases your party's max health, and restores a surplus energy charge whenever they evade an attack. All the Hypogram Fields last for a minute, and they all have a 30-second cooldown. This is an extremely useful skill for both grinding and bossing, but mainly grinding. Hyper skills for Xenon, while they do seem basic, are still nice to just have as part of your kit. Your first hyper skill, Entangling Lash, is simply a bind that also attacks in front of you a little bit, 3-minute cooldown. Orbital Cataclysm is a skill that looks like it attacks everything on screen, but really just attacks around and slightly above you. Using this gives you an iframe while it's being cast, and after casting increases your damage slightly for 25 seconds, as well as reducing the defense of enemies hit by it by 30% for 10 seconds, 50-second cooldown. Lastly, Amaranth Generator instantly maxes out your surplus energy gauge and lets you have infinite uses of surplus energy for 10 seconds, 90-second cooldown. Hyper passives aren't anything too crazy, at least for these first two for Beam Dance and Mecha Purge. You'll want the Reinforce one for both of these for extra damage, but all the others are fairly negligible. Spread for each can have its use cases if you use those skills for grinding, but otherwise the only ones you'll want for both are Reinforce. Meanwhile, on the Hypogram Field side of things, get every single one. Reinforce for damage, Speed to make the orb bounce around faster, and Persist to make it last 10 seconds longer. The reason you'll want all of these is Hypogram is just a really good, fairly long-lasting summon, useful for both grinding and bossing, but especially for grinding. You can just cover one side of a map fairly comfortably, now even more so with all these hypers. Xenon's 5th job is more packed densely over every other class because of the sheer amount of shared nodes they get. Before getting into that though, let's get Xenon's skills out of the way first. Omega Blaster is your burst skill that initially lasts for 6 whole seconds. You can hold it down, and doing so lets you charge it up and make it last longer. You can also cast other skills while holding it down. The duration increases by 1 second for every 3 seconds held, up to an extra 3 seconds at level 1, going up to 6 extra seconds at max level. The extra duration is indicated by this little bar that appears next to you as you hold it. Once it's filled up, you're good to go. Releasing it fires off the big beam, decimating everything, and makes you invincible for its entire duration. Clicking the skill again while it's firing simply just cancels it. 2-minute and 45-second cooldown from the moment the beam starts firing. Core Overload doubles your surplus energy and makes all your skills cost no mana, while also stopping your MP recovery entirely. This is because it has no set duration beyond draining 1% of your max mana every second, plus an additional 220 mana on top of whatever that 1% cost is. You also generate cores faster, going from 1 every 4 seconds down to 1 every 1 second. Yes, it says 1000 seconds currently, blame Nexon for that, I promise it's 1 every 1 second. And every surplus energy you have now gives 1% extra final damage. Periodically while this skill is active, it spawns red shocks around you, damaging nearby enemies. 3-minute cooldown, and clicking the skill at any time during its duration cancels it. Hypogram Field Fusion combines all 3 Hypogram variants into one big one, as well as gives you more Aegis system missiles while attacking inside the field. The only difference between Hypogram Field Fusion and all the other Hypogram Field variants is the Fusion one doesn't increase your allies' max health. 30-second duration, 90-second cooldown. Photon Ray is a skill with 2 stages. Clicking the skill puts you in the first, which is called Aim Mode. All this does is put target reticles on nearby enemies for 20 seconds. Click the skill again, and you send out blasts to these targeted enemies. Attacking an enemy multiple times marks them with even more reticles, dealing more damage when you activate the skill, and hit them a certain number of times. I can't find exact documentation for everything, but while used in bossing, attacking the boss with Mecha Purge Snipe gives 3 extra shots per hit, up to about 5 or 6 times when it reaches max capacity. You can tell it's at max capacity once the ring around your character while in aim mode goes from a wobbly solid ring to a broken up particle ring sucking in lines of energy towards it. If you wait out the duration of aim mode for about 15 seconds, it just sends out all the shots, just so long as you remember to click the skill again. Also, if you die while the skill is active, it cancels it. 30-second cooldown. For shared nodes, since Xenon is both a pirate and thief, they get all those classes' shared nodes too. That's 6 in total. Well, I mean technically 5, but let's get the shared resistance ones out of the way first. Resistance Infantry places down a whole bunch of resistance members where you cast it, and they simply attack nearby enemies on both sides of them for 10 seconds, 25-second cooldown. Maple World Goddess's Blessing increases the stats from Maple Warrior and gives a slight damage buff, building up 1 charge every 3 minutes and holds up to 2 charges. Next, Shared Pirate Nodes. While Xenon doesn't inherently get Roll of the Dice, they can still use this node, Loaded Dice, which gives them Roll of the Dice anyways. First, Roll of the Dice gives 6 different buffs, specifically these ones you see on screen, but the most important ones you'll be caring about are 5 and 6, extra damage and extra XP. Clicking the skill on its own gives one of these buffs randomly, and has a 3-minute buff duration as well as a 3-minute cooldown. Second, Loaded Dice lets you choose your dice roll. No additional dice like the skill says though. That part's for pirates that get Roll of the Dice as part of their pre-5th job skills. Anyways, clicking the skill brings up a list of numbers, and each one corresponds to the buffs, guaranteeing you'll roll that number every time you use Roll of the Dice. Overdrive is a nice burst buff that lasts for 28 seconds at all ranks, increasing your attack by a percentage of your base weapon's attack power. At level 1 it's only 22%, but at max level goes up to 80%. The one drawback is once this skill goes on cooldown, your attack is reduced by 15% at all levels until it comes back off cooldown, which is 1 minute. Last but not least, Thief Nodes. Realistically, Last Resort is the only one you'll be caring about here, as Venom Burst is not worth getting for nearly every single Thief class. I believe some people pointed out to me Kadena has some use for it, but anyways, Last Resort is another damage increasing buff, similar to Overdrive. Click it once to activate its first stage, which reduces your avoidability and increases your hit damage taken and final damage dealt by a slight bit. Clicking it again activates stage 2, which halves the remaining duration of this skill. It also destroys most of your avoidability, reducing it by 90%, increases your hit damage taken up to 40%, but in return triples the final damage amount from stage 1. Clicking the skill a third time cancels it entirely. Right-clicking the skill in the skills window makes it go to stage 2 instantly upon the first click of the skill. 90-second cooldown at level 1, going down to 75 seconds at max level. Now that all their skills are explained and out of the way, let's make them much easier. Starting off with the modes for all of their skills that have 3 sides to them. Going sequentially from 2nd job to 4th, starting with Quicksilver. You won't be using this for damage anymore, and the only utility any of these have is Takeoff, which functions as an up jump. Similarly, in 3rd job, Combat Switch's Fission is also an up jump that can only be used in the air, so stick with that too for more vertical mobility. In 4th job, for Mecha Purge, you'll want to be swapping to Snipe for bossing, and Bombardment for grinding. Avoid using Bombard, as it's slow and doesn't offer much of anything. Bombardment's good, Bombard's not. Lastly, for Hypogram Field, you'll want to keep this on Force Field for nearly all situations. The Xenon Discord mentions Penetrate has some use on big bosses such as Gloom, but since they don't elaborate further, I think it's only Gloom. While in bosses where you need to stay in the air temporarily, like in part 1 of Lucid to avoid her dragon, or part 2 and 3 of Lotus to avoid his map-wide ground shock, you can use Liberty Boosters as a little floaty skill. Don't forget Photon Ray is both useful and also requires some remembering to make full use of, in the form of waiting for that wobbly solid ring to break up and change form, before clicking it again before it ends for its full use. As it's a short cooldown skill you can use often, you'll do good to remember that. For grinding, your main method will be placing Hypogram Field on one side of the map, ideally covering a bunch of platforms, and then using Bombardment anywhere else your Hypogram Field doesn't cover. If you have the space to include things like Urta Fountain or Will Skill, and soon with Dreamer Update Soul Janus, that's even more map coverage, clearing out more sections of the map and making training much more laid back. Upart's Code is an insanely good buff for just about everything, and you can have it up all the time if you conserve your surplus energy resources properly. You'll more than likely have enough charge for it every minute when it expires, and if not, you have Emergency Resupply and Amaranth Generator, as well as 5th Job's Core Overload to replenish your surplus gauge often. Seeing as it's a 30% final damage and boss damage debuff, it helps a lot to keep this up at all times, especially while bossing. While you could couple this with Orbital Cataclysm for its 10% damage buff, you'll ideally want to save that for its iframe capabilities, thanks to its relatively short cooldown of 50 seconds. One of the more important aspects of Xenon is their weird method of bursting, and I feel it's deserving of its own section to highlight for people within the chapters what to do exactly. So as you probably know by now, Omega Blaster is nearly your entire burst, with everything leading up to and after it being built around it. It has a weird synergy with Beam Dance, which when used slightly after releasing Omega Blaster, lets you get the damage of Beam Dance while still in the Omega Blaster animation, even if you don't see the Beam Dance animation on your character anywhere. This can be proven by using both during a battle analysis. To do this properly, charge up Omega Blaster, release it when you're ready to do so. Right as you release it, between the time you let go of Omega Blast up to around when your character is stepping back, hold down Beam Dance. Getting the timing takes a few tries, and having to wait nearly 3 minutes per attempt is kind of annoying, but it does contribute to your overall burst damage. This very likely is a current bug/glitch, but it hasn't been addressed in years. Chances are someday it will be reworked or removed entirely though. If or when that happens, Omega Blaster will probably still be your main burst, so just be aware of that. Xenon is currently the only class in the game whose main stat is 3 of the 4 main stats, meaning they're rolling for % all stats for all their potential lines outside of their weapon, secondary, and emblem. You do get a slight boost from Star Force, up to 100 stars through your beginner skill, Star Force conversion, but beyond that, you're on your own, through getting % all stats through further Star Forcing purely on your gear or potentials. As for if you should choose Pirate or Thief equipment sets, choose whichever you like the look of more. Early on, prior to like 120-ish technically, Thief would be slightly better only because you get a top and bottom, as opposed to Pirate only ever getting overalls until Chaos Rudibus set. Once you get to CRA, Absolab, and onward though, it all depends on whichever you think looks better. Just remember though, you have to match the set types with the class, so sadly you can't have a Thief glove and Pirate shoes work towards the same set effect. When it comes to emblems, Xenon's kind of an oddity, because they have to get theirs from a shop in their Veritas home base area after doing a specific quest from Edwin called An Engineer's Dream. I'm not entirely sure the level of this quest, Hidden Street says 35 and MapleStory Wiki says 43, but once you complete this quest consisting of fighting a couple Pantheon monsters and getting their drops, you can buy your emblem through Edwin for around 1 mil mesos. There's no limit to how many you can buy either, so you could cube 2 different ones freely if you wanted. Xenon's best in slot secondary is similar, requiring you to buy it through a secondary weapon vendor via the Evo Lab secondary box for 100 mil mesos. It's not a massive increase over the base one or Princess Nose, but it's got 2 extra attacks, so it is technically the best you can get. Link skills are the most different of any class in the entire game. Nah, I'm just pulling your leg, it's the same as every other class. For grinding, the typical Aran, Evan, and Mercedes for extra various XP boosting things, Lara Link if you need more normal enemy damage, and fill in the gaps with whatever else you have. Usually damage dealing links, looking roughly something like this. For bossing, get anything that gives good amounts of damage geared towards fighting bosses. Demon Slayer and Avenger, AB Link, Luminous, Kana, those kinds of links. Here's roughly what those look like. Resistance Link I'll always advocate for because staying alive longer after respawning is so incredibly comfortable. Explorer Pirate's Link skill isn't a bad option either because of the flat all stats it gives, but mainly as an early game buff, or for grinding purposes, as it doesn't give a whole lot at later stages of the game. At max level, it gives 70 all stats. For inner abilities, since Xenon falls into that category of barely reaching the attack speed cap with all possible buffs, yeah, you'll want attack speed +1 as the first line. Second and third lines, you'll want boss and abnormal status damage if you plan on bossing. And for settles/grinding, the typical drop and meso are good too. The Xenon Discord mentions buff duration as a fine settle as well, but purely only for a longer lasting AB link if you use that. Xenon has 14 Trinodes to choose from, so here's what to get. Your main first perfect Trinode would be Mecha Purge, Beam Dance, and Hypogram Field. Beam Dance is here mainly because of its weird double use with Omega Blaster, even though it's not really used for anything else. So if they ever change that in the future, just keep that in mind and adjust as you see fit. Hypogram is also here mainly because of how good it is for grinding, clearing out one section of a map, and Mecha Purge because it's both your main bossing and grinding move, depending on if you're on Snipe or Bombardment respectively. The second set is Pinpoint Salvo, Triangulation, and Orbital Cataclysm. Pinpoint and Triangulation are good passive damage, and Cataclysm you'll be using frequently anyways because of its damage buff, short cooldown, and iframe. If you're using Xenon purely as a boss mule, Xenon Discord says you can scrape by with just Mecha Purge, Beam Dance, and Triangulation. For Burst/BA, start off by making sure you got all of your typical buffs and toggles on. Then hold down Omega Blaster, and while still holding it down, pop Core Overload and Maple World Goddess's Blessing. Once your surplus gauge maxes out, use Hypogram Field Fusion, stand inside of it for extra damage, pop Overdrive and AB Link, then click Photon Ray. After that, use Last Resort, and then finally release Omega Blaster, but now instead hold down Beam Dance. Once Omega Blaster is ended, or when Last Resort goes away, you can stop holding down Beam Dance, click Photon Ray, and then keep spamming Mega Purge Snipe. Shorten down, buffs and toggles, hold down Omega Blaster, Core Overload and Maple World Goddess's Blessing, Hypogram Field Fusion at max core charge of 40, Overdrive, AB Link, Photon Ray, Last Resort, let go of Omega Blaster and swap to holding down Beam Dance, release Beam Dance at the end of Omega Blaster, Photon Ray a second time, spam Mega Purge Snipe. The main things to remember here is to buff up with everything you got and prepare everything for that giant Omega Blaster damage, and also slight micromanaging with knowing when to pop Photon Ray. Fairly simple as long as you practice using the Beam Dance Omega Blaster combo. Xenon isn't perfect or very well documented in terms of everything they can do, but past their jungle of skills and modes, I think they're pretty alright. Yeah, to be an effective one, it'll be costlier than other classes due to percent all stat reliance, and require you to get to at least 6th job just to take advantage of all their nodes they get. But even just for trying out how they play, or if you want their pretty decent Link and Legion block, in my opinion, they're still pretty fun. Thanks to the Xenon Discord for having all their resources and explanations organized throughout multiple threads and channels, complete with quick navigation, and also for answering my question about Beam Dance's Blur Hyper Passive. And as always, thank you for watching. If there's a class you want me to cover, suggest one in the comments. If you just like hearing me talk about Maple classes or are awaiting more guides from me, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm still kind of shocked at how many people asked for Xenon, probably the most of any class yet, but don't worry, I see all those other suggestions people are asking for. That's all.